That is the really nice thing about long series is when you seed all those tiny things, and like you were saying earlier, that's when you get those payoffs that just like you feel it in your bones, and you're just like, yes, give me more. Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and I am sitting with returning guest JCM Berne, author of the Hybrid Helix series, which I got one right here, with the latest edition being the Shield of the Mothership. Welcome back to the show, Joe.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes,
After this
I'm
huge
glad you're
gap
back.
between this and the last episode.
I know.
Entire
I
week has
had
gone
time
by.
to change clothes and everything.
I didn't. I'm still wearing the same shirt. Someone's going to complain in my household.
You could have done laundry since then. We don't know.
That's true. That's true.
But last time we explored like really how you have matured as an author and gotten to where you are today. But today we're going to be digging into the topic of long series challenges. And the first thing that I wanted to ask you is why this topic?
Jeez, I couldn't think of anything else I know anything about. I think that was the primary reason. You're like, what should we talk about? I'm like, I don't know. We can't talk about marketing. So if no one wants to spend 45 minutes talking to me about marketing. I find first of all, long series are in my heart, right? I really love them. I really love like the Dresden Files, and I was fascinated with them since I was a kid. I remember watching Saturday morning cartoons, and this is way before your time, but like there were these cartoons being coming from like Japan, like one of them was called Battle of the Planets, which in Japan was called Gatchaman, which was this team of science ninjas, which is like one of my favorite phrases, even though I'm not really sure what it means. They were superheroes. It was the Japanese take on superheroes. Um, and what I realized watching this, and I was little, like this was on, so like 3 4 p.m. and in the U.S. With English dubs, and there was a running storyline. Like you could tell that these characters had like a backstory, and you get an episode that reveals something about the backstory. And it was so different from so many of the American Saturday morning cartoons, which were designed that you could watch any episode and figure out what was going on. Right? There was no recurring stuff. There was no long-term plot because they didn't think you'd stick around for that. A lot of American television was designed that you can miss an episode and it wouldn't matter. Even like soap operas were super redundant. So I got into soap operas for a while. It's a long story we don't want to talk about, but even with soap operas, you
Some
could
of us might
miss
want to.
you could miss many episodes and still follow it because it was so repetitive. But there was still an ongoing storyline. But with the cartoons, with stuff for kids, they really didn't do that. And then Battle of the Planets did, and then there was another one called Star Blazers, which is I think it's based on Battleship Yamato, which was the Japanese one. And that was even more a storyline. This was like a battleship. It was like a spaceship from Earth, and they had to get to like this alien place to save the planet. And it was like every day that, and every episode was like a countdown. Like we're now 187 days away from our destination. And you watch the next episode, like 183 days from our destination. Like to me, this was mind blowing. I'm like, oh my God, there's like they're getting somewhere. Things are changing. This episode, they're closer, they're further. It blew my mind that you could get this extra level of meaning and enjoyment that from the episodes because there was this overarching story and not just the story in the episode. And I love that. I don't know why. I loved it so much. I felt like I think because I'm a collector. I think at heart, like I like the idea you could collect. You're collecting the story. You're collecting the information, the bits. Um, and I love that. And that's not true of a lot of, that's one kind of series. Obviously, there's another kind of series, which is like, James Bond, where James Bond doesn't usually, traditionally doesn't change. Or Jack Reacher doesn't grow or change. There's no ongoing, like, oh, he's fighting this, you know, serialized villain where, in this episode, they're trying to take over a state, then they're trying to take over the country. That's not how Jack Reacher works. But I really like the series where there's progress and it gives you this feeling that you read a book and you enjoy the book, but the book is like another plank in this bigger thing that's happening. Um, and I love that. So I'm like, that's what I write. And it's hard to market. It's hard to sell. Like if I write a book, and if what I'm working on now is book 8, no one's jumping onto my series at book 8, right? So it's tricky, but it's fun.
When you started Hybrid Helix, did you know it was going to be a long series, or did it evolve naturally that way?
I don't know that I don't know that I knew like now I have an ending. Like I know how it ends, loosely. I don't have like each book plotted out, but I know the end game. And I don't really think I don't think I had all the specifics worked out, but I had a general idea of what I wanted to have, like very general idea of how I wanted things to progress. I mean, and I knew, because I knew the hybrid helix, you're basically starting with a character who's sort of al- almost has PTSD, right? He's been through some stuff that's off page. It's not really on the page, but he just wants to be left alone. And I love the character wants to be left alone, and then is convinced that he can't be left alone because stuff's going to keep happening, and then eventually becomes proactive. Um, so that's the arc I wanted, was for him to become proactive and, like, I don't know, go out and do something, and take charge. Yeah, so I don't actually remember how much of it I had planned when. I kind of wish I did. Sometimes I'm like, when did I think of that? I have no idea. But I knew I wanted, I mean, clearly, if you read the first book, it was clearly setting up a lot of things, and even if I didn't know exactly how they were all going to pan out, I had a plan. I had plans or ideas. I wanted a bigger story to be told, because I've always done that. Every book I've ever written, pretty much, maybe except Partial Function, but even stuff I wrote that's never going to see the light of day, there was always a bigger intent, because that's what I like. I like the Dresden Files. I like this. You can read these 18 books and, like, oh, or 17, however many are out, and, like, oh, like, now we're getting to see who the bad guys are. Now we're getting to see the long-term plan, like the because it's not just Monster of the Week with the Dresden Files, but it can feel like that for quite a few books. And you're like, oh, these Monsters of the Week are tied together. Some of them are tied together in interesting ways. And those are the payoffs I like. I like when there's a payoff that comes books later, because it's unique, right? I mean, in one book you can do a lot, but if if people read like my series and they get to like book five, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, all this stuff that's been happening for four books, all this character development, it culminated in something. That's a different feeling than you can get from one book. Um, it's a different kind of satisfaction, and I live for that. I love that, right? And I'm hugely gratified when people read book five and they're like, "Oh, the ending blew me away." And I'm like, "Yeah, the ending of none of the other books is going to blow you away, but you get through five of them and you're like, oh, you start to see the picture that I'm drawing, and it's a big picture, and you can't do that in one book, or you can, but it has to be super long or something. But even one super long book is doing a different thing. It's not the same as when you put little threads in like a bunch of shorter books and they merge in a way that someone didn't expect. And that's where I love that whole surprising yet inevitable. That's Brandon Sanderson always talks about that, right? How you make a good plot twist is surprising yet inevitable, because the twist happens, and anyone can write a plot twist that comes out of nowhere. It's like, and then the aliens arrive and save everybody. You're like, there were no hints that there were aliens in this story before this. Like, it's surprising. You surprised me. Congratulations, but it doesn't feel satisfying at all. But the trick is when the aliens show up, or like the ending of The Sixth Sense, right? That movie where you get the ending, and you're like, oh, there were actually clues. I didn't notice them, but there were clues littered throughout this story. I didn't see it coming, but I feel like I could have, and that's the surprising inevitable. But when you can layer that through many, many books, it's extra satisfying to me, extra satisfying. So,
No, I will
um,
definitely agree. I feel like the alien suddenly arriving is like the equivalent of a jump scare. It's like, yes, I was scared for this second and you got me, but I'm going to move on with my life now and not be impacted anymore. While the ending of The Sixth Sense, or one of my favorite like long-term payoffs in a series, is Matt Cawthon in The Wheel of Time. Like, so good how his character arc goes through. And
mhm.
for spoilers for anyone who's ever going to read that series and hasn't for some reason, just like how his prophecies get fulfilled is so satisfying, because
Mm,
like it's coming, but then it comes in a way that you never
yeah.
expected. It's so
Prophecies are
good.
fun to play with. I've been playing with them in the Hybrid Helix, starting with book, I forget, but there's a bunch of prophecies that start showing up, I think, in book six. And they're just fun because you can just be like, because then again, you do that. You're right. That's exactly it, right? You have this thing that happens. You're like, oh, you told me that was going to happen 2 books ago. I just didn't
Yep.
understand it. And that's so much better than just coming out of nowhere, or the
Oh
Deus
yeah.
Ex Machina, right? That's why. Uh, we hate the
And
Deus Ex Machina. It's
yeah,
like it's deeply unsatisfying.
yeah.
So
No, prophecy tropes are very satisfying. And when done well,
yeah, yeah,
I will say
yeah.
they are very satisfying.
I feel like I even like the
So,
ones in Terry Goodkind, although liking anything from Terry Goodkind is not fashionable. I'm not saying I liked his books as a whole. I like parts of them,
you
he did a lot of fun stuff with the prophecies. That's another story. Anyway,
you can be entertained. That's okay.
yes.
So, what's been the hardest part about like keeping continuity straight across multiple books?
I don't find that difficult as much as just you got to take notes and you gotta and then I feel like everything that I do in my books is very much me. It's very much based on a very particular ethos. Like I really understand my magic system because there are things about magic systems that really annoy me that I know I'm not doing. So like very specific. Like I know if I set limitations early on, um, they're really like part of me. Like I can't break them because it's like I couldn't write anything any different. Like time travel, right? Too much time travel, just it's impossible to plot well. So I just like I know like I'm never going to be tempted to like oh and then I'll have a time travel book 9. Like it's not going to happen because I know that I know myself. Um, so that's taking a lot of notes helps. Really understanding like because a lot of the things that are happening where what's on the page is a little snippet, but I know the backstory. Maybe the backstory came from another book that I never finished, but it's still in my head. So I know more fully what's going on. So like remembering the details is never really that tricky. The names are tricky. Sometimes remembering the names of people. Like I remember my narrator for my audiobook was like how do you pronounce this word? I'm like, I have no idea. Is that from my book? And I looked it up. I'm like, yes, it is. I put that. That is the name of a character in chapter 17. I have no idea how I intended to pronounce that. And I have to think of it now and give it to my narrator. So there's stuff you forget. I keep lists of like random background species because I'm always going to have my characters like, and you walk by and these two guys from Traktor, the planet where everyone's blue, are like mopping the floor. And then I'm like, and then you always want to write that down. Then you have someone else from Traktor in book 3 or whatever. You don't want to just forget about that because that makes it feel like it's a real world, even if you know nothing about Traktor, right? You just there's no Traktor in my books. I just made that up. But like you don't have any background there. It doesn't mean anything. But your readers, it'll feel like a lived space. If people are from a place that gets mentioned, and now we're all eating. Oh, we're having these Traktorian French fries. They're delicious. They're made with pepper instead of salt. And now all of a sudden people feel like they're in this huge, rich world, and there's nothing. It's completely empty, right? You just made that up on the spot. But now I guess Traktorians like pepper, right? So this is now a thing.
Yeah, the
Um,
callbacks make it feel more real.
yeah, 100%, 100%. It's a
Yeah,
huge. That's that whole iceberg theory of world
yeah,
building, right? The
the
you
hollow
show them a
iceberg. Yeah,
yeah the hollow iceberg, right? I guess that's Sanderson's, right? You show them a little bit, and they feel like there's so much more. And if you do it right, you don't need more. You don't need. I have not spent like because there are people who spend like years like, what's the calendar on Traktor like? What's the ecology on? What kind of animals do they ride? I'm like, you don't want to do that if you're trying to write a space opera. I think that's gonna suck. Because I mean, I'm positing, 1,000 intelligent species in this sector, right? And do I have 1,000 even name? I don't know if I have 10 of them named. I don't have. I certainly don't have 100 named out of 1,000, right? Like it's just a tiny sliver of the thing. But you just put enough little splashes. Um, and then so you have notes and yeah, and you spend a lot of time working on it, I guess.
no, that makes sense. Like, and I agree with you on the world building thing. Like, I am a staunch believer in that you only world build as much as you need to for the story, because otherwise, you're just doing that for your own entertainment. Like, yes, is it helpful to know these things, like how they made this oil system over here and this farm over there? If we never go over there to that farm and the oil is never relevant, like, why? What are we doing here? You're wasting your time,
You are, but there are people who just like it, and there's
and that's
nothing wrong with
fine.
that. And yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And I don't want to shame anyone who's like, I spent 2 years world building and I love doing that. Like that's fantastic, man.
that it's
But then
fun. It is very
but
fun.
because you have to think of like, what is it? Did it serve your writing? Maybe it didn't, but maybe you enjoyed it, and that's great. But if you're a writer and you're like, I have to figure out all the holidays for these 7 different sects of this country we're never going to travel to. But no, you really don't. You really don't. You put in one holiday here or there, and I'm not really good about this. I'm really bad about holidays. I really should always have this is my world building trick for everyone else that I don't do as I say, not as I do. If you're on like a multicultural, like cosmopolitan city or space station, whenever things are happening, have some random species having like some celebration in this square, and they have to like divert around it to get to where they're going. No one cares what their religion is or anything, but it'll feel so much richer if you just throw that crap in and do some like weird like custom, right? And they're all like carrying around piñatas and to celebrate like what, and you can just make this stuff up and it's in 2 seconds, but it makes people like, wow, the world building is so rich. Like it's not, but you can make it seem right, right? You can trick people. So
Well, that's
um
really our goal as like writers and authors
yeah,
is
yeah,
to
yeah,
trick people
yeah,
into
yeah,
believing our
yeah.
stories.
And then the best part, and this is the other thing you do in a multi-book series, is then every once in a while you take one of those things and you make it matter. Like that holiday they were celebrating, they were actually trying to like, they were all like carrying piñatas to like drive back this evil deity, and then in book like 13 that evil deity shows up because they didn't have enough piñatas that one time, and you realize because your character disrupted their parade, and all of a sudden it's like this thing that felt like this filler background, all of a sudden it matters. Those are so much fun. I love pulling those off. And that's something you can only do in a big series, right? In a book you can do it, but in one book it feels too much like Chekhov's gun, right? Like everything you've seeded is something you use by the end. But when you write a series, you seed a lot of things that you don't use by the end of one book. And then people don't know if it matters or not. There's a great thing in Wistful Ascending. Well, I'm saying a great thing, like I'm super arrogant, but like there's this scene in Wistful Ascending where there's this character who, yes, in book, so it's book one, right? And this character, I'm not giving too much away. His soul can jump. So if you kill him, his soul can jump to a clone body and he can survive death. It's the only way. There's no coming back from the dead in my books, but this is a way you don't really die. And there's one species can do this. And so Rohan is like, well, how far can your soul jump? Because you're like, well, if his soul can jump to his clone body's got to be somewhere nearby. So where is it? Like, does it have to be in the next room? Could it be in a different star system? Because I want to find where that soul's going, because that gives me a thing I need. So they're like, oh no, it can't jump between star systems because there's stuff between the stars that would eat it. It's like, that's it. It's the only reference. But those stuff between the stars that can eat souls, I'm like, well, there's stuff between the stars that can eat souls. Like that, that could be just color to make it clear that, okay, so the ship's in the system. And that solves the problem for the plot. And I feel like most readers read that and go, oh, he just said that to make it, to give a reason why we would know that he doesn't have to leave the system. He can look for the ship. But then it's like, oh, yeah, keep the story local, right? But then you take that, so it makes sense to the reader. You understand the logic of why that's said and why that's part of the world building. And then you twist it and you're like, oh no, those things between the stars are super important. And that's like the crux of the whole storyline. And you don't realize that until like book 3. And now is all of a sudden the person, right? And now it's like you have that, right? You have that chance for those moments that you can't do. So if you can hide the things that matter and make them seem like hollow icebergs, and then you can throw a lot of those in, and half the time I throw those in, maybe not half, but a lot of the time, and I don't even have a plan. But then later on, I'm like, oh, that thing I referenced 2 books ago, I can use that here. I don't remember. I don't remember if when I wrote that thing about the things between the stars, I don't even know if I had a plan when I first did it. But now it's like the crux of the whole series is about, well, we should maybe be concerned about the things between the stars that eat souls, because maybe that's a problem. Maybe they're not going to stay between the stars. We have to. That's a concern. So when you can take those things and you would shift them, the reader thinks it means one thing and it does. Then it also, and that long series. But to seed those, you have to seed a lot of stuff, and and that's why there's a lot of stuff going on. There's like giant monsters and there's huge bugs, are and you convince the reader like, oh, the bugs are here for this reason because it solves the plot problem in book 1. But then you come back to the bugs later and they solve a plot problem in book 2, and then maybe in book 11 you're going to be like, oh, the bugs actually are a bigger issue than we realize. And that to me as a storyteller, that's the joy. That's the joy.
Man, That is the
So
really nice thing about long series is when you
yeah,
seed all those tiny things. And like you were saying earlier, that's when you get those payoffs that just like you feel it in your bones and you're just like, yes, give me more.
yeah. Like the ships in my series are alive, right? But no one really says much about that. Like, oh, they're living ships. Okay. And like you know, so I gave everyone 6 books to get used to the idea that ships are alive, and that's just a thing that happens. And then in book 7, you find out where they come from, hence mothership. And it's like, oh, now I can deliver this thing that's going to feel satisfying and feel like a payoff that you weren't expecting, surprising yet inevitable. Because I never really said, and we'll find out where they come from 3 books. That never happens. Because you're just like living ships. Okay, that's just a part of the thing. And no one merely mentions, but and you don't want to you don't want to have everyone go, but where are they from? Like everyone just like, because it's their world. Their
It's
world
part of
is
the
full
world.
of
Yeah.
living ships. Yeah, they don't. They must come from somewhere, but oh, I don't know. I don't know where my carburetor was made. I mean, clearly it
Yeah.
was a factory somewhere, but I don't know where, right? I
But the
don't think I have a
reader takes
carburetor.
cues
Yeah,
from the characters because the characters are like, this is normal. It's a living ship. We all know what that is. So then
yeah.
the reader cues into that and is like, yeah, this is normal.
You can do that can do so much work for you as a writer that the readers being used to accepting so many things, and then if you later take those things that they accepted because they're used to books where that's just the thing you accept, and then you explain it or you use it in a new way later on, you get all these moments. And those moments can only happen if you're writing a series. I keep saying the same thing. It's only happen if you're writing a long series. But to me, that's the joy. There's so much fun to plant those things and then pluck the fruits of it. 3 books later, 5 books later. So right now I'm in my element because now I have the 7 books. So now book 8, I can pluck. Oh, there's this character. Remember that character from book 6? Well, now she's hurt, and we have to go save her, right? And you're like, oh, okay. So she wasn't just a one and done, and you get this growing cast, and people feel. That's another beautiful thing about a series is that people who are character-driven readers develop emotional ties and relationships with the characters, and then it's very satisfying to readers to come back and you have and you can't overdo it because you can't give every character a plot arc in every book. People say to do that, and I think that's BS. I don't think it's maybe it's write 400,000 more books. I don't know, but I can't do it. Most of my characters I don't, and I think it's most people don't change that much month to month, right? Most people are adults. Adults are adults, right? And do people go through transformative experiences? Sure, but people don't change every 6 months. They become new people, go through a character arc. That's not so, but then you have a character stay the same for a while, and then you have something happen, and they change a little, and you're like, ooh, and people really feel invested in that. They feel like these characters are their friends. You get that Motley Crue dynamic going on, and then you come back, and you come back, and again, long series. There's all these things you can only do with that one. So you write one book, it's never going to be that intimate a relationship because you haven't had time,
Yeah, it's a
But you
flash
give it,
fire in the pan
yeah,
versus a
yeah,
bonfire that continues to burn.
continues to burn exactly. So
No. So
those are the
do
joys.
you ever? Oh, sorry.
No.
But do you ever feel like you box yourself in with the choices that you make early in books?
It's really hard because I'm a stickler for backwards compatibility. So, like for example, if I have like a new threat show up, first of all, why didn't it show up before? Like, why is it new? I have to have a rationale for that to satisfy me. And then it's also like once you have like an ability or like an ally, can we just bring these same allies in for the next guy? So you get this whole like I don't know if you're familiar with like Dragon Ball Z, but like any progression storyline, it's always like, well, what if Frieza had shown up like 2 years earlier? Everyone would be dead. Why didn't he show up earlier? Right? So it's like you don't necessarily have to answer all those questions. It depends on the reader, but unfortunately, I'm that kind of reader where I really want the backwards compatibility. Uh, so that's really tricky. So yeah, so you have to be very careful when you introduce someone super powerful. It's like, well, could they have handled all the problems that came before? Like I have a big thing where like Earth is under serious threat in like book 2, and like people are like million, and it's like, but once I have Earth under serious threat in book 2, means there can't be anyone on Earth who could have stopped that because why didn't they? Right. So now I've established these hard limits. Right. These anyone who could have prevented that had to have been. It's only so many of those people who can they were just busy, right? They couldn't save humanity, right? So you have to be careful and really think about the ramifications. And it's the same thing in fantasy, right? Like if you have like, the evil empire invading, you know, why didn't they invade earlier before these characters were ready? Who else is an ally who could have stopped them? If you find some new powerful ally in book 7, why didn't they help in book 3? Right? So it's always a trick. Um, and so for me, it there, there's different ways, or you can work around it, but you just have to be careful and write a lot of notes.
Yeah.
Write a lot of notes.
Notes seems to be the solution for a lot of things in a long series because there's just no
Notes.
way you're going to remember everything.
Yeah, you
You
can't.
can't unless you're some kind of like super quant.
Even better than notes is to get those super fans who will like read all your stuff and they'll memorize every detail. And then I need
and
some of those. I need some people
and
who are
then
like,
make
oh,
a wiki for you.
then make the living wiki. I know authors. I've heard from professional authors who have gone to their fans' wikis to help them solve problems. Um, like I knew a guy who used to do this was a long time ago, but he would basically read like every Marvel comic, and then Marvel would pay him like as a consultant to help them with like history of their own stuff because he had read more than anyone who worked for Marvel. So it was like a side gig for him. Like he'd write like history pieces on like the history of these characters so if you can get a fan like that, that's the best solution. But if you can't, or if you can get a spouse to do that, and help with the wiki, that'd be good. And mine does not. I don't
Have you
think she.
found a super fan yet?
No, I've had people read the books and enjoy them. I haven't had someone volunteer to make a wiki for me yet. So maybe when anyone listening, if you want to make a Hybrid Helix wiki, DM me.
Joe
You
is
know where to find
taking
me. I'm taking
applications.
I'm taking applications. Super fan. I'll send you a signed book or something. I don't know. Um, but
That's definitely worth it.
yeah, yeah.
No,
You
that's
need
a great idea though.
yeah, you need notes. And it really helps to write the notes as you go. I'm terrible. I'm not good at that. So often when I'm editing. Or when I'm doing like the final line edits, also I should write down the names of this bartender. That's the worst. Like it's a bartender, right? So you're like, wait, what species was the guy who like waited tables in this restaurant? I'm like, and you got to like go through old documents to try to figure it out because you don't want to be caught. I mean, people change jobs, so you have an excuse, but you don't want to go too far with that. Old ships, um, but the taking the notes and keeping track of the details and then bringing the details back, it's really nice. Like I'll always have like a ship show up just to keep like Rohan's busy, and instead of just saying he's docking the last ship of his ships, he's docking the last ship of his ship, the Love Boat or whatever. And you bring it back in future books, and again, that can make your world building seem so much more developed than it really is, because you don't need to actually know what's going on with that ship. And then you can even have fun because then again, you pull that ship in, and one day you make it part of a storyline. Oh, that ship's been there for like 12 books. And now it's doing something. So
Now it's relevant.
now it's
No,
relevant. Now it's relevant.
I agree with the note taking while you're writing. I'm really bad at that. I didn't start taking notes on my book until I started editing. But at the same time, like, one, it's bad. You should definitely do it sooner because it's just so useful. But two, what happens when you take a note about something and then you change what you took the note about? Then you have to go update the note too.
I have notes for every book, and then I have notes for the world as a whole, and they don't match at all, which is not good. And then, but I'll go back and I'm reading, and this is fun, right? If you're an author for long enough, go back and read the notes you used to plan an early book and realize just how much you didn't use and how much you changed and how much of it ended up twisted or not twisted in a bad way, but just different. I think I just went through all the notes for like book 2. I'm like, I can't even like, especially because in my notes, I'll tend to put like my very preliminary ideas of what the book should be about, like at the top, like just sentences, like about like plot lines, 3/4 of which never get used. I'm like, oh, that was a good idea. I never used that, or that's a stupid idea, or that's a terrible idea. I'm glad I didn't use that, looking through old. That's another joy of a long series. You have to keep going back to that, I mean, I don't think Will White is looking at his notes for like his first trilogy, now that he's working on the captain stuff. But if you're writing a long series, you kind of have to. So it keeps pulling you back.
Yeah,
So
you need to stay consistent.
yeah,
So, how do you balance introducing new readers to the series without alienating long-term fans with like repetition? Like you were saying with the Jim Butcher series, sometimes those middle books feel like monster of the week. How do you prevent that from happening?
I don't know that I have, right? I tell people to start with book one and read straight through. I don't tell anyone to get hop on in the middle. And
I can't
it's
even imagine doing that.
it
Skipping
yeah,
books to go to the middle. Yeah.
yeah. I tell everyone you got to start with book one because this important stuff happens and character development happens in every book. And I try to make every book matter and stand alone. And that's a huge restriction on the plot. So you've got to as a writer, you need to put I think restrictions are incredibly useful for anything you're writing. You have to have your parameters and your restrictions. So for example, all my books have to be about the same length. All my hybrid helix, they're all within. I think Wistful Setting is 117.5, but the others are all between 118.5 and 120 word count. The page count might not be the same because some have a little
Oh,
more
that's
dialogue,
true.
but
Books
they're
vary.
all
Yeah.
they're all right around 400, a little over 400 pages. So it's really a very narrow range. So that helps me constrain like the kind of stories I'm going to tell, and it helps me uh, control my pacing. Everything just works better if I force myself to hit those very narrow word count limits, and then I have to have like, and then it really helps if you're having a series to think of either you don't have to have each book be a self-contained story. Lots of people write trilogies or 7 books where it's really one big thing broken up. But even then, you want to have a beginning, a middle, and end to each book, sort of. And you have to have an idea of like how much you're wrapping up in each book. If it's one big, if it's like Lord of the Rings, you don't really wrap up a ton in the first book, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
open-ended.
It's more of an
Um,
introduction.
yeah, mine are much more. Each book is one story, and then I have to think of them as how many new things are you introducing, how many questions are you answering from previous books, and then so most of the questions you raise in each book have to be answered in the book. If you're doing a series like mine or like Dresden, most of the questions have to be answered in the book. A fraction of them can be left open to the next book, and a smaller fraction of the questions from the previous books can be answered in your book, and it's almost mathematical. Like it's not, but you have to almost think of it as like I always joke that like in the first third of the book, you rate for every 3 questions you raise, you answer at most one of them, and then in the last third you reverse it. Like I used to try to come up with mathematical formulas. You don't really want to count or tick mark, but that is kind of how you have to think about it to make the pacing work and to make your endings work. And then the trick is with a series, you have more open questions in each book, and then you answer the questions. Part of each book's job is to answer questions from the previous books, and but not too many, because if it's too satisfying and you know everything, it's like, well, I'm done. You know, people stopping at book 14, like, well, now we know what's going on. No, no, no. You always still want more open-ended stuff. Um, so that just takes a certain amount of planning and a certain amount of throwing stuff in there that you're not even sure how you're going to get to, but you hope you will figure it out. So. And then you have to, and then if you're, and then you don't want to write a 20 book series where I don't think you really want to have figured out every detail before you start. I think that would be boring. You have to give yourself room to sort of throw stuff in there and be like, oh, but I can use this in this way. I don't know that anyone, I can't imagine like planning out 10 years worth of work and then just doing the work like that. That would be, I mean, maybe someone could do it. I can't. I'm still thinking of new things, new details, and I leave a lot of things deliberately fuzzy. I'll have a like, oh, and then he's got to get this axe somehow. I don't know. He's going to get an axe. I don't know the details, but I'll hopefully sometime in the next 5 books I'll figure out how he gets an axe. And I'll have a good idea for how he gets an axe, and he'll have an axe. He's got to have an axe. I've decided.
No, no, that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of I've heard the advice sometimes where it's a lot like in coding, where like opening and closing brackets. So you open this bracket here, so it's going to be the last one that you close, but you're going to open this one, close, open, close, open, close, open, close until you get all the way
Yeah,
to the middle. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. With a series, you can't do that perfectly. You can't really have the first scene of the book
yeah,
something you don't resolve until the end of book 25.
that would be
But
wild
the
if
but
someone
the
did that.
book is yeah. But the people wouldn't enjoy it because that they want that first scene to be resolved at the end of the first book, more or less, or
That's
at
valid.
least
Yeah.
partially resolved, right? So I think your readers wouldn't put up with that because that's really just one giant book. But you do have open brackets left, and thinking about it as open brackets is a really good way to think about it. I write in Java, so I should have thought of that myself, but I never did. But it is how many open brackets are you leaving after each book? Um, and it has to be some, but it has to be something like you have to close 2/3 of the brackets in the first book and leave a third of them dangling. And a third is a
Mhm.
very rough fraction, but that is how I think about it. I'll leave a bunch of stuff dangling, and then in the second book, You can close a third of the ones that were dangling from the first book, but open up a bunch more, and then so on and so forth. Um,
Yeah.
that's how I think about it.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier about like characters changing, and characters do grow and change over time, more so than I would say in like real life. Like it's definitely more poignant in a book because that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
So what challenges come with keeping that growth consistent but not stagnant? Because you want them to change across the series, but you also want them to change a little bit in this one story too.
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
I have no idea. That's a great question. Probably, I would say that think about how long you're going for and err on the side of caution. So people will forgive you, or if you have your main character going through some changes and the background characters are changing much less, people are okay with that. I've found most readers are fine. Most readers are fine with background characters that remain pretty stagnant. And then you give them change in bursts. So I'll have background characters not appear for entire books, and then they'll have like like a secondary plot maybe once, and then not again for a couple books, and then bang. Um, and people will accept that, right? People don't. Most people don't expect as long as the characters have something to do. I think maybe that's it. Maybe if the characters have something to do, it doesn't have to be changed. They can be supporting someone else's change in their very standard way. So I have a couple characters in the series that basically did almost no change for like the first 5 books, and then did some in book 6. And I went back and forth. But you've gotta, but you don't want, you can't win. You can't, in a way, you can't win with a series. You're always going to disappoint some people. Some people will always want the thing you can't do. Some people will want the characters to grow and change in every book, and other people would have been upset if you had done that because they want their characters to stay the same and familiar. And you have to, as a writer, uh, understand that, accept that you will every decision you make will upset people, especially with a long series. That's one of the downsides people get vested in. They think it was going in a direction, and then you take it somewhere else, and like, oh, and that will upset some people. Sometimes unreasonably so, like really. And you, as an author, have to sort of accept that that's just going to happen, and you have to be okay with that. You can't write a book 2 and expect to please everyone. I always say this about book 2s. You can't please everyone in the book. You either are going to write the same as book 1, which will make some people very happy and upset some others, or you do something different, which will just upset and make happy the other set of people. But some people want the same book again. And I was tempted, right? After I wrote Soul Ascending, I was tempted to do a Monster of the Week series where very little change from book to book. And then instead I did something else, and it pissed off a lot of readers. And there's a risk, and it may not have been the right decision, but you got to go with you got to figure out what you want to do, and hope it pays off.
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately you have to write what you want to read.
So you, this is what many of us do. Uh, Many people also, write what they think people will buy, and they write to market. and
That's
they
true.
and
That's
that
true.
that is a different skill set and a different level of discipline, and I don't have it. I have tried to write the books that I thought would sell, and I can't get through more than a couple chapters. I get bored because it's
Yeah.
not so. So you have to figure out who you are. And I don't mean you specifically, Michael. I mean anyone listening,
The
right? You have to
royal
figure
you.
the royal, yes. You have to figure out who you are with that. So I don't like to say you have to write what you love. That's not true. Lots of people don't, and some people are very successful and rich writers who don't write. I know a lot of writers who have written a lot of stuff they didn't love, and you can tell. But they made a lot of money, right? Some of my favorite writers they've written some like some IP stuff where you could tell they didn't care, but it was a paycheck. I mean, and I've heard writers talk about, oh, this, what was going on with that book? Is, oh, that book was my hot tub repair.
Mm,
Like I needed 10 grand to fix the hot tub, so I wrote that book for Star Wars or whatever, right? And
yeah.
like, there's nothing. I'm not criticizing. Like that's what you do, especially if you're a full-time writer and that's your income. But luckily, I'm not in that position, so I do get to write what I love, and that's
Good.
all I have to care about. So yeah,
No, that's good.
yeah.
So you've written 7 books. You're working on the 8th right now. What would you say is the most challenging part of writing this long series?
The most challenging part is setting things up and not being sure. The challenge. It's the pacing. It's the inter-book pacing. So, for example, there's this threat that I introduce in book 4, and I feel like the readers are expecting a showdown with this threat, which is reasonable, right? This is a threat. There has to be some kind of showdown and either a resolution, some kind of resolution to make this thing not a threat anymore. Gets killed, gets imprisoned, something has to happen. And it doesn't happen in book 5, and it doesn't happen in book 6. And when book 7 came out, I was really concerned that readers would turn on me and feel like it needed to happen in book 7. And it's very hard to tell in a single book, or even in like if you have a trilogy, like a fantasy trilogy, the big bad gets dealt with at the end of the trilogy. Everyone knows that. That's accepted. In a series like this, I'm having these intermediate threats, and can I put it off? Like, can I leave it till book 9 before this thing gets resolved that started in book 4? And I have not had a good answer to how to handle that, other than I'm trying, and so far no one's complained too hard. I have not had a negative review of book 7 that said this thing needed to be fixed, needed to be resolved here. This book sucked. That hasn't happened yet. But honestly, that's how I know. Like, I literally released the book, and I'm waiting, and I'm reading the reviews, and I'm waiting for a bunch of people to go, Joe, shouldn't have done that, man. We needed this thing to end, but no one said it yet. People might in the future. I don't know. But that's really tricky, is the pacing. Because people talk a lot about pacing in books. People even talk about a lot of pacing when you have a storyline, right? Like across like 3 books or even 5 books. That's like a story broken up, and it was like a typical epic fantasy. Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time is what, it was 14 books, but it was one big story. It was one big story, right? So I think we have an understanding of how to pace it when we're doing that, but there's much less discussion of how to pace like the background storyline that progresses in something like the Dresden Files. Has the I haven't heard Jim talk about how fast he dribbled in those background bits that make up the overarching story in the Dresden Files. I don't know if he's talked about it, or maybe I haven't heard everything he said, but that's really tricky. That's really tricky. And you have to count on sort of your intuition and readers. And then I tried, and I wasn't good about it, but I think there's room in our space for people who do developmental editing at the series level, which is not something people talk about. So if anyone's talking about doing that, I haven't heard it, but I think it's a discussion that needs to happen. Because developmental edit is when someone looks at your book as a whole and looks at the structural issues in the book as a whole. But ideally, we'd have a dev editor who's, I don't know what they would look at though. I'm talking about a 25 book series where I don't have a strict outline. I don't know what they would look at. It's really tricky. I tried to hire someone to do it, and through no fault of theirs, it didn't really work out. I didn't really know what questions to ask because I didn't have you have to write the books first. And I don't want to write 25 books and then have a dev editor look at it and go, actually, book 17 should be completely changed, right? Or book 17 through 25, you can't do that. You have to release them as you go. No one wants to write 25 books and just sit on them and then have editors look at I guess you could. I don't have the patience
It
for
would
that.
be a huge investment.
Right?
And that's
Right?
probably why we don't really see a lot of discussion around
It
that.
would be a huge amount of time. You have to spend 10 years of your life doing something that no one's read, and then try to get
That
someone
might
to
not
like.
pay off.
Yeah, that might suck, right? That's the other part, right? You don't want to write 25 books and find out that you're actually crap,
Yeah.
because that would be a huge waste of time.
That'd be
So,
very unfortunate.
so
Like
you
there
got
are
to,
people that
yeah,
write like 3 books or 5 books even all at once and then release all of those at once. But I haven't heard of anything beyond like 5 books.
no, A.R. Witham did it with the Rooker Flynn trilogy. So he wrote Blackjack, and then he did the trilogy, and he wrote the whole trilogy and then had them edited. I don't think he had the final versions of the third book when he released the first. I believe he was still work polishing it up, but it was written. Early versions were written, and yeah, yeah, but I was certainly not. I'm not patient enough. Like, could I have written 20 books of the Hybrid Helix and then started release? I don't have the patience, right? I needed the only thing that kept me motivated to write book 5 was a feedback from book 1. And if I had gotten none, if no one had liked book 1, I wouldn't be writing these. I'd be doing, probably have a much easier life. Just, I don't know, like watching sports, or more Bollywood movies, or whatever I'd be doing if I wasn't writing. But no.
Instead, you're here with us, going to be at Dragon Con bars drinking and
Yes,
talking with
yes.
writers.
That is
You're
that. Yeah,
stuck.
I am. I am. I do love doing that. Do love doing that. So
So the last question that I actually wanted to ask you today, Joe,
shoot.
is looking back, is there anything you would do differently if you were to start the series over again?
Take better notes. Um, there are elements of the whole story that every once in a while I'm like, I don't really handle this well at all. And the world building and the background, and that every once in a while I kind of wish I had done better. And they're usually you can sort of figure them out from who I am. Like I'm not a particularly religious person, and I realize there's very little religion in the books. Most of it is like people curse by different things, when they stub their toe or whatever, and that's part of culture and religion, but it's a very minor part. And I don't have a whole lot of I don't deal with a whole lot of that. I mentioned earlier we were talking about festivals as like a part of your world building. I just don't do enough of that, partially because I'm not really a festival guy. I don't really my wife's really into holidays. That's the funny part. My wife's really into holidays, but I'm not. So I wish I had done more with that early on, just to enrich the background. Um, of the series. There's some language choices I made that I wish I had done differently, like the terms I use for the magic and wistful ascending. I just slowly switch them and I use different words now. I use the word metaphysical for like the magical powers, and that's a terrible term. And I have a philosophy background, and I know that's not what metaphysics means. And yet I use that term because I didn't want to use the word magic, and I didn't think of another synonym, and I did drift away from that. But that's a pretty minor thing. Beyond that, there's not a ton that I really regret. I wished I had a little more, yeah, a little more religion, and most of the other stuff. I think a lot of things fell in lucky places. I made some decisions early on without really needing to, without really thinking of the ramifications that worked out really well, which a lot of it's luck. And that's a terrible answer, right? Like how do you write a long series that works? Like some of it's be lucky, and or hope that you're lucky. Um, Beyond that, like I mean, this marketing and financial decisions, I still think I probably should have gone with cheaper editing and cheaper covers. As much as I love my covers, they make the series a financial burden that I could do without. Um, and part of me wishes I'd gone with like a comic book art for the cover, like a genuine kind of people who do covers for Marvel or DC, and see if I could get them to do the work instead, or people who draw in that style. I'm not sure that would draw the right audience either, because I don't really write comic book stuff. So I don't, it's hard to say. But those are the big things. It's some of the language I wish I thought about more, and then the some of the world building I wish I put a little more thought into early on. But
But it sounds like overall you're pretty satisfied with what you've
yeah.
created, and it seems like a lot of people are. And like I said, I've read the first one and
Yeah.
I laughed. I liked it a lot. It was
Good.
really
Thank
fun.
you. I appreciate that, Michael. That's very kind.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I think we are running out of time for today. Joe, once again, could you please tell the people where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
JCM Berne. You can find my books on Amazon, all of them. And I have a Patreon that there's very little on there. But there's a free tier on the Patreon. So if you join that, you can get news and stuff whenever I have news, and then you have to pay me anything. And I have a website, jcmberne.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter. We get access to all the free stories and an occasional newsletter from me with some stuff in it, but not. And again, you'll find out when the new book comes out. And I have a YouTube channel where I yell at clouds about books. It's JCM Berne on YouTube, and a little show called Book Burning where I promise to never ever burn a book. And there's not a lot of content on there. I throw out an episode every so often. Right now, I'm drafting. I'll put more on the YouTube channel when I'm done writing book 8. Um, no, no, you can't have time for everything. As much as I'd like to do everything, I don't have. And yeah, and follow me on Blue Sky, jcmberne.com, JCM Berne, whatever, Blue Sky, and Twitter, Joe Byrne 1. And I'm on Facebook, but I don't put anything on Facebook. I like social media. I don't know if you can tell, but
That's all right.
yeah,
You
because
just decided to spread yourself wide.
I work from home, so it's like these are my friends. This is how I interact with humans. A lot of it through social media. Anyway, that's
Well,
it.
I'm glad you could come on to the show
Thank you.
and like
Thank you for
we could
having me.
finally meet, because I know we've been
Yes.
like at the edges of each other's social
Oh yeah,
circles for a while.
absolutely, Absolutely. Michael.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. Excellent.
Very good. Thank you, man.
I know it's getting late and stuff for two, so I appreciate you holding on.
Oh, my pleasure.